Welcome to Outside of the Classroom. It's your boy Pham, speaker, writer, and entrepreneur. Each week, we bring together inspiring guests to help you learn useful shit, prepare you for success, and do work you love. Thanks for spending time with me today, and without further ado, let's dive on in. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Pham, and welcome to Outside of the Classroom. Today's guest is Arthur Chu, and I've been following Arthur ever since he went from becoming a normal guy in Cleveland, Ohio, to 11-time Jeopardy champion. He is absolutely brilliant, and the advice that we talk about today is definitely worth taking notes on. So fun fact, I actually met Arthur at a tech conference where I was showcasing my startup, and after talking for a bit, his crew started to film us, and now I found out I'm going to be a small feature in his new documentary. That's a fun fact. But anyways, in this episode, we talk about why did America hate Arthur and want him off of Jeopardy? How do you deal with haters from all around the world? What was the mindset Arthur used to win $300,000 and so much more? Make sure to go back to the show notes at outsideoftheclassroom.com/Arthur to see all the resources and all the stuff we talked about today. And without further ado, let's dive on into this episode with the one and only Arthur Chu. Arthur Chu, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Before we start, I just want to say thanks so much for coming onto the show. I can go on and on about your success with Jeopardy, and all of your other ventures, doing voiceover or doing stand-up. But I would love to just have you introduce yourself and give my audience a backstory about yourself.
Well, my name's Arthur Chu, and I'm a guy from Ohio. And last year, I won $400,000 on Jeopardy, and that got me in the national spotlight. And I've always written stuff about my opinions on culture and politics, but usually people didn't read them. But ever since I got in the spotlight, I've been able to publish my writing, and so that's my job now. But yeah, I've done theater and speaking and stuff for a long time, so I'm kind of now, a jack of all trades. A Renaissance man, if that's not too pretentious.
Renaissance man.
Yeah.
That's very, very cool. So because of Jeopardy, you were able to showcase your work to a massive audience. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And what did you write about typically? Or what did you speak about to this massive audience that you now had exposure to?
Well, I got asked to write originally because I had done a lot of interviews about Jeopardy, and specifically, people were all asking about the so-called controversy when I was on Jeopardy. There were a lot of people who didn't like me on the show and thought my strategy on the show was unconventional, or didn't like my appearance on the show, thought I didn't respect the show by dressing up nice enough, and that kind of thing. And so I spent a lot of time responding to that. And I ended up writing a lot as a result of that. And some people thought my writing was good. And one of the guys who interviewed me, Sujay Kumar from the Daily Beast, asked if I wanted to continue writing for his publication. And at first it was a lot of pop culture stuff and a lot of stuff about trivia and game shows, because that was what people knew me from. But I think the turning point was when the Isla Vista shootings happened in 2014, and I reacted to those and wrote a thing about misogyny and entitlement and nerds. That was the subtitle: misogyny, entitlement, and nerds, and why a lot of young men who identify as nerds or geeks or outsiders have this resentment towards women, and that piece really struck a chord and got shared a lot, went viral, and then sort of from that point on, a lot of people wanted to know my opinions about nerd culture, so to speak, about, these kinds of issues. Gamergate happened that same year, and a lot of people spoke out against that, and I was part of that. And so that's sort of become something that I end up talking about a lot, is growing up as an outsider, as an Asian American. That's something that I'm familiar with. And a lot of the toxicity that's in the communities around, the geek identity or the nerd identity. What's it like being a gifted kid and dealing with that feeling of isolation, but also what it's like having a lot of these privileges and advantages and not seeing them as such, and ending up hurting other people because of it. So,
Yeah, I'm very interested because I also saw all of the outrage when you were on Jeopardy and all of your posts as well that got a lot of negative criticism and negative feedback from people all around the world who are just hating on you and your strategy, for example, to pinpoint on one thing. But when I saw you, when I first discovered about you, I thought he's playing the game right. He's not breaking any rules, not breaking any laws. He's just playing the game fairly, and people say you're cheating, but there's no rule being broken. How did you respond to some of these negative critics that were attacking you throughout the show?
well, I mean, I think a lot of what made me interesting was that I hit back, and I mean, it was sort of easy dealing with that kind of criticism because it was so substanceless. It was so silly, but it did reveal a lot of negative things about people's assumptions. A lot of, I wouldn't hesitate to say it, a lot of racism and that kind of thing. And so, when I publicly called it out and responded to the haters on Twitter, I think that just kind of that attracted a lot more people to be interested in me than were before. So yeah, it was a lot of I think I made an impression on a lot of people because I refused to just kind of take it or ignore it. That I shot back, and that's a habit that I kind of have, and it's not always the best habit, but in this case, it was ultimately beneficial. So.
There are many people listening to this that will go on to be successful entrepreneurs, actors, or successful creatives who become a public figure. But some people are afraid of that spotlight, and they have like this kind of an imposter syndrome where they think they don't deserve to be there or belong there. What do you suggest to the listeners listening on how to respond or how to handle haters in their life in general?
Right. I mean, there was a lot of stuff about like, oh, Arthur doesn't deserve to be on the show, doesn't deserve to win on Jeopardy, which is really stupid, honestly. And I think like just keeping that perspective from the beginning, like Jeopardy is a game show, right? It's
Yeah.
they decide whether or not you deserve to be on the show. It's not a test of whether you're a good person or an objectively knowledgeable person. The reason it's called trivia is because you don't need to know it in your everyday life. And just like having that in mind, it's like I don't deserve any more or any less to be on the show than anybody else, and
Exactly.
I'm not here for you really. Like the people saying like as a game show they need you to be entertaining for the audience. I was like, well, that's their problem. It's not my problem, right? To just have that, I mean, Jeopardy is an extreme example, right? It's obviously a game. It's a game show. People often internalize the standards of other institutions. Am I an objectively good or bad person, a deserving person, and if I get into this college, if I get this job? And you've got to always keep in mind that these things are arbitrary. They're made up by other people. Your self-worth has nothing to do with that. The only person who can judge you is you. And that was something that really kept me going through the Jeopardy thing, and thereafter, saying a lot of controversial things and taking stances that got a lot of people that mad at me. But remembering like the important thing is being honest and true to myself, right? Um, is that I'm not here to make people happy. And in my case, I got a lot of attention and I got a lot of notoriety by not making people happy. If I had been, a perfectly likable person, they wouldn't have noticed me in the first place. I got attention for who I was, and I'm going to continue to, be who I am and see if people like that, I think that's the best policy in the long term.
Very cool. While you were on the show and while all this controversy was happening, how did you manage to control your emotions and keep your head in the game towards winning, which is your obvious goal? How did you push away the
Well,
haters and just control everything?
I mean, we have to separate a few things. The show was taped months in advance, so on the show itself,
Oh,
I had no control over what people were going to see because it had happened months in advance. So that was part of it, is that you have to own it. If I had wanted to change my behavior based on what people said, that was impossible, right? Which is actually a pretty helpful place to be in a lot of ways. But also, while it was actually going on, while I was actually on the show and dealing with the haters, a big part of it was, understanding like, as an observer, having seen other stuff like that happen on social media, that it's impossible to please people. It's impossible to make everyone happy. That there are people that the structure of the environment rewards people for getting mad, right? Like, it's not interesting to not be mad. So there's always going to be someone who wants to get mad. That's why there's such a thing as trolls. That's why there's such a thing as, outrage bubbles, because people want attention, and you get attention for starting conflict. So you can either just avoid that entirely. And right now I'm off of social media because I have other things I'm doing, and I don't need that right now. Or you can embrace it. But the one thing you can't do is sort of uselessly like complain about it or fight against it, because it's not going to change. It's not a feature of any individual person. If one individual person changes their mind, there'll be someone else to take their place. It's the structure of the environment. It causes people to act that way. And you just have to kind of understand that. You don't have to like it, but you have to deal with it on its own terms. And it's like that with any other kind of social dynamic. Is a lot of times people get hung up on saying this is unfair or this isn't right, and it may well be unfair. It may well be a bad thing, but you have to understand what you can control and what you can't.
That's such a great philosophy to live. What you can control and what you can't.
Mm-hmm.
It's so strange because people focus on, you being Asian American, you doing unorthodox strategies, but people overlook your brilliance and your success on the show and how you're winning every 11, or how many games did you win? 11 straight? Is that
11,
correct?
yeah.
11 straight games. People overlook that, and I'm just so perplexed by that fact. I want to segue into you preparing for these shows. Being on Jeopardy, I'm sure it's one of the most, what's the word, like, very, what's the word when you're like, your mind is racing and you're like sweating.
Right. It's like having an anxiety attack. You've got to get that out of the way. But
yeah, you're playing at the highest peak of, like, national television. How did you mentally prepare for that, and how did you keep your mind from not getting fatigued during the show?
Well, it taped over the course of just 3 days, and that's the thing. I did end up getting fatigued after. On the third day, I was just like really messed up. But I think I did sort of just, when I knew I had this once in a lifetime opportunity, and I had a month to prepare for it, I just sort of shut everything else out of my life and just focused very much on that one goal. Because what I told myself is, after this one session of taping, it's all over, for better or for worse, right? You get one chance to be on the show. I'm not going to get another opportunity like this anytime soon, so I was hyper focused on, I did all the things. I put together a plan and followed the plan. I did all the things that I decided I was supposed to do. I watched the show, I studied, I made flashcards, I practiced a lot, just like getting in the mindset of being on the show. And it just seems to me like a lot of people who get on the show don't expect to win or don't think they're going to win, so they prepare for other things, right? Who they think a lot about the stories they're going to tell or how they're going to look for those 22 minutes. And I didn't, and as a result, I didn't look that good in those 22 minutes. I didn't come off that well, but those are two wildly different goals, right? They're two things that kind of eclipse each other. There's people who, I even said like, I gained weight in the time that I was getting ready to be in the show because I wasn't working out, and I had a friend tell me, well, I would have, starved myself before going on the show just so like I could look perfect, and I was like, but then you would have lost, right? And that's a difference in tens of thousands of dollars. So it's sort of the priorities, right? And that was always kind of hovering in my mind where I want my priorities to be, right? That just to like keep it in my head, this is your one chance to do it. And just in terms of like practical realities, winning tens of thousands of dollars, which is like the average winner wins like $20,000. That's a huge difference in your life from not winning that much money.
Oh,
and to just prepare for that. I didn't expect to win, $400,000. I didn't expect for my story to go viral, but those things wouldn't have happened if I hadn't like prepared to do the best that I could.
definitely. So for the people who are listening who have maybe not a massive stage presence like Jeopardy, but who have maybe a big test in mind, or they want to land like a promotion, or those who just want to advance, who has a goal, what kind of like productivity advice would you give them to focus? Like you would laser on focus, you cut everything off, you kind of visualize yourself on
Right.
stage. Do you have any like specific productivity advice for those who have something similar to a massive goal like Jeopardy?
Well, um, the best advice I can give is kind of general advice, and it's the sort of thing that sounds obvious when you say it, but a lot of people don't, and I actually personally have a big problem with this. It's that everybody has a bunch of different things that they want to do, but you've got to really sit down and think about the things that are most important for whatever reason. And when people don't consciously do that, people have a tendency to kind of give equal time to everything on their list without understanding that some things on the list are much, much more important than others. And I know I did that in college. I like let extracurricular activities eat up my life when I should have been focusing on graduating, right? I've been doing that through the past year, just because whenever you're exposed to a new environment, I've had like tons of different requests to do this, to do that, to appear here, and it's overwhelming. And I have to think what's most important. There's people who talk about like the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, that
Yeah.
and for most people, you find out that 20% of what you're doing accounts for 80% of the benefit, of the profit, or of the impact. And it's just because we're naturally kind of bad at focusing. Is that when you have a list of things to do, they all kind of seem important just because they're on the list, and it takes a conscious effort to cut things out. And I actually feel like, yeah, it was kind of, to me, looking at it from a logical perspective, for that month, I was like, it's only a month. And in that time, the preparation I do could mean the difference between winning no money, like winning $1,000 as a consolation prize, which doesn't even really cover airfare for flying out there. That time, airfare and hotel, right? Or winning like $20,000, right? Nothing else I do in that time could possibly be worth all by itself, like $20,000. And yet, it still seems to me that it was strange looking at other contestants. Like, most people did not spend all that time studying and researching and watching the show over and over again. Most people just said, well, whatever happens, happens, or I don't want to unbalance my life, even though, putting anything else as a priority during that like very short window of time is unbalanced to me, because it's not taking into account the cost benefit of it. And so that's
Wow.
really what I would say. It's like, if you have an opportunity and it's really important, you know, ask yourself, keep like going through real things. Is this really important, or is this just an obligation that I've put on myself? I was like doing a theater thing at the time, and I just dropped it. I was like, I'm sorry, but this is less important right now. It does compared to the rewards that I could get for doing well on this show.
Yeah.
And that's an important. You've always got to be. My dad used to say, you have to take care of yourself. You have to be selfish, because if you're willing to give everything people ask of you, they'll keep on asking, and they won't stop. And that's sort of like, as someone who's been involved in theater a long time, it's like theater will take from you as much as you're willing to give. And I know a lot of people who do a lot of this work, to the point where they're like sort of hurting themselves to a degree and not prioritizing, not like thinking what of it is rewarding to me. And so they get, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of exploitation of creative people. People talk about doing things for exposure, and how common that is now, that people will keep on saying, do this, put in this labor, into this project that doesn't have any direct beneficial reward for you, and the hopes that it eventually will. And you have to be really analytical about that, because lots of people pour away their heart and soul to things that don't benefit them. And that doesn't necessarily mean, I don't necessarily even mean a financial benefit. If it benefits you in a personal, emotional way, if you feel what you're doing is actually important, that's one thing. But a lot of times people can't, you ask, why is this important to you? And they can't really say it. It's just they feel an obligation to keep doing it. And I think among creative people, that's kind of endemic. That, we wouldn't see all these people asking people to do these very difficult, draining things for exposure if people weren't, giving themselves away without thinking about the benefit to themselves,
Mm-hmm. I really love how you have your priorities straight. You said, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is extremely important for me. I need to focus, and that's what exactly you did. And not only that, you had such a winning mentality. You didn't really care about how you looked or what clothes you're going to wear. You just cared about, how can I win this bad boy and just wipe the competition, and that's what you did, which is very, very inspiring mindset to have. But I'm very curious. I want to segue into your time before Jeopardy.
I was working a full-time job. So I had I graduated from college a while ago. I'm 31 now. I had gotten married to my wife when we were living in D.C., and she wanted to move back to the Cleveland area where she grew up. And I got a job through a connection, and it was a good job, 9 to 5 job at an insurance company. And that's the kind of thing, I had sort of this stable life that I'd put together, and doing theater on the side and finding time for stuff I enjoyed. And then Jeopardy kind of tipped all that upside down. But yeah, I mean, a lot of what I was doing after college was like trying to decide, what do I really want to do, and what do I really, the money stuff makes people think I sound like very money oriented, which I guess is an Asian stereotype. But really, really what had happened after college is that I'd really struggled because I graduated in the middle of the recession and jobs were hard to find. And the big thing is, money gives you the freedom to do what you actually want to do. And it was very hard to find the time and energy to do things that really were important to me when I had to scrape by to make a living. And that's why, I think in some ways people, especially people who come from privilege, don't value money enough, because they don't really think every dollar you have is a dollar that you don't have to earn in the future. That it's buying freedom. It's not just buying things. And in my personal life, I try to be very frugal with my money, because I think of it as like, right now I don't have to work a day job. I could go back to a day job if I wanted to, but right now I have the freedom to spend my days doing things that matter to me. And I'm lucky enough that I can even get paid to do things that matter to me, but not paid a regular salary, not paid a dependable income, but that I don't have to worry about that for now, because I have a financial cushion. And that's a huge gift. And that's something that happened because, at the time when it really mattered, I thought about money a lot. And I still do, think about it. I'm willing to do a lot of stuff for free if I believe in it. But even now, it's like, I feel like a jerk sometimes, because I clearly have a lot of money because I won the money on national TV, but people will still ask me to do something. And if I don't really want to do it, then the question is, am I getting paid to do this or not? Because my time is valuable. Time is the one non-renewable resource. The only value of money is to push away demands on your time, right? Is so that you don't, otherwise you have to trade your time for money to live. And so that's true. And I'm always thinking, like, everything I do that makes more money gives me more time to do stuff that I really want to do. And if I can do things that make money that I also really want to do, that I would be doing anyway, that's the ideal, right? That's the dream. Mm. And that's sort of what I've tried to construct for myself. So
that is the dream. Thanks for sharing that. You mentioned you did more outside while you were in college. You spent more time outside of like your studies, doing your extracurricular activities. And after college, you went into an insurance company. And then after, what is it, like about 7 years, or 7 years, maybe 5, 6 years, you went on to Jeopardy. and that totally changed your life. Did you think college properly prepared you for the career that you have today?
No, well, actually, it's kind of funny because in a lot of ways it did, but in an unexpected way. That going to Swarthmore College, which was a small liberal arts college, it exposed me to a lot of ideas that shaped my thinking, a lot of discussion about intellectual ideas for the first time. And I wouldn't be, writing the way I am today or talking about stuff the way I am today if not for that environment. But it didn't, in terms of a career, it didn't really, and it's not entirely on the school. It's on my attitude too. It didn't really put me in a mindset of how to get in a career where I could do that for a living. And I'm only able to do it for a living because I've had a lot of good luck, basically, a lot of good fortune that other people haven't had.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would phrase it in terms of like saying, oh, I wish I'd have been taught more practical skills, because a lot of my problem was that I'd sort of grown up with an upbringing where my parents just kind of expected that I'd get a high-paying job, but a very demanding job, like to be a scientist, to be an engineer, to be a lawyer, and have that be my life. And in college, I had this crisis, like, I don't want that to be my life. But there was nothing to replace it with, right? And if I'd come from a different background, I might have in college, like I spent a lot of time in college doing theater, even though theater wasn't my major, because I was caught between these two ideas. Like theater was what I actually enjoyed, what I actually wanted to do, but it wasn't what I was supposed to do with my life. And so I was caught between two things, and therefore not giving 100% of myself to anything, and therefore failing, right? That's what happens if you split yourself up too much. And I kind of feel like what I regret was that I was never taught to think strategically about what I really wanted. That it was either being practical means doing this one particular set of things, or anything else is just impractical. And not thinking about in terms of like finding a practical way to do the things that you actually want to do. If you want to be a writer, how do you become a writer? If you want to be an actor, how do you become an actor? And my parents' advice would just be to say, don't, right? Don't do that. And in college, I didn't really get a lot of direction about how to do that. It was just, people asking me, oh, if you want to act, but you don't want to get credit for it, fine. We've got a lot of ways to do that, right? People exploiting you. And so that's kind of like what I wish that there'd been some kind of structure around deciding what you want to do and then planning how to do it. And I kind of feel like that's been missing. That's missing for a lot of people,
As an Asian American, I can definitely relate to many of your struggles, especially the doctor and lawyer one. Awesome. Well, what book would you recommend to young people graduating from college?
What book would I recommend to young people graduating from college? It's not a very practical choice, but the book of essays, A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again by David Foster Wallace kind of changed my life after college. And David Foster Wallace, I'll just like, as a thinker, as an observer of the world, as someone who gets you thinking about like, what do you want out of life? I very strongly recommend him. And that's like the classic, book of essays. So that's what I would give to a college graduate.
Cool. I'll have to check that out. And one last question. Do you have any parting piece of guidance for the listeners here listening to your advice today?
I would tell you that you need to make a strong distinction between what you want and how to get what you want. Don't ever let anyone tell you what you want, but always be looking for advice from people who know better than you on how to get what you want. That's what you need to be learning from others. And it's very important not to confuse those two things.
Don't let anyone tell you what you want. That is great. Well, Arthur, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Where can our audience